City of Stevens Point Public Protection Committee meeting, recorded Monday, July 8, 2019.
It is 6:25. We'll call the meeting of the Public Protection Committee to order. Looks like everyone's here. First item on the agenda is an appeal of notice service charge for a property maintenance violation at 1617 West River Drive. Is someone here to speak? Go ahead, sir. When you get to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Todd Vodolevich, 1617 West River Drive. Stevens Point.
Okay. You're appealing,
Having items out in the yard or whatever, which I did take care of when I got notification, but I was remodeling my garage, or repainting it, I should say, and it was a process of a matter of time to get the stuff done. I was putting down epoxy in it, in the floor and stuff, so I couldn't put nothing on the floor, so I had to have everything outside.
it appears from the notice that one of the items was still out there when they re-inspected. I think that's,
Yeah, and actually, I did move it. I had it on a trailer, and I had it alongside the house instead of in the front of the house, because I had no place to put it at the time. DB's gone now.
And that's good. That's good.
any questions from the committee?
If I could, I'd like to make a motion to approve the appeal for purposes of framing our discussion.
Okay, do we have a second? Do we have a second?
For lack of, no, that's it.
Okay.
For lack of a second.
For lack of a
motion
second,
fails.
the motion
Fails.
dies, or fails, I should
I
say.
do have a question.
Okay.
If I can. Sir, you said you had it on a trailer,
Yes.
but in this picture, it does not have a trailer. It's just that it was moved off to the side.
Off to the side, and I had explained that to Mark. I ended up having to use the trailer the one day. And it must have been that particular day that they went through and seen that I had it off the trailer.
I guess I would just like to make the comments for justifying my desire to approve this appeal. Our ordinance says, you know, that the item should not be out longer than 24 hours, and this individual indicates that he is doing work on trying to improve his home and has actually been moving and complied when asked. And these pictures are a point in time, and so they are actually insufficient evidence to prove that this gentleman was actually maybe moving the items inside and outside, and so perhaps on the particular times that it was being inspected, they were outside, but there's no evidence to actually say that it was outside for longer than 24 hours. And furthermore, my second thought with the ordinance is that it speaks to whether or not the items being outside reflect the nature of the character of the neighborhood, and this is a neighborhood that's within my district, and I've spoken to all of the neighbors around this property, not recently, but in the spring, and all of them, in talking with them, requested and spoke to their desire to see less enforcement or less, less strict inspection of these sorts of violations. And so I think the fact that this individual was one trying to improve his property and was in time complying with this, I think if there was a complaint about this from the neighbors, then maybe we could say that this wasn't reflective of the character of the neighborhood. But what I hear from the constituents and residents in that neighborhood is actually the opposite. And they had no problems or complaints to speak of, that this was just a part of a routine patrol. And so I think that in this particular case, Mr. Cortes's reflection of the neighborhood's character may be inaccurate. And so that's why I'm looking to approve this for this individual case.
Mayor.
So, a couple questions, sir. The items that we see outside in the first picture, those were items that were in the garage and you moved them outside
Correct,
to do the epoxy floor and painting inside?
correct.
Okay, and all of those items were then moved back into the garage when the epoxy was dried?
Everything was all put back into place, yes.
Why wasn't the TV moved back in?
The TV was moved back in.
We've got two pictures on two different dates here. June 3rd, and it looks like May 15th. So when was the TV moved back
It
in?
was actually moved from the front of the garage when I got the first notice, and that's when I had it on the trailer.
Okay.
And then when I moved it to the side of the house, I did not know, basically when it came with the paper had said that it couldn't have the TV. I didn't know that I couldn't have it outside, period.
Okay. So how long was the TV outside for?
Until after I finished the garage.
2 weeks?
2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that.
Is there a reason that the TV wasn't moved back in the garage when the floor was done?
I did move it back in.
Okay, when was the floor done?
I didn't finish the floor up until just about the middle of June.
Okay. Okay, so it was actually outside for longer than 2 weeks?
I actually put it down in my little shed.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alder Nabel.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand how wording can make something change the thoughts and how you have to have proof, but I think one of the biggest things we need to remember is that each district has the same ordinances, and we can't spot an area. We've talked about this with garbage cans, and we talked about it with everything down the road. What affects one neighborhood in one area has to be enforced in all of them. And I personally, in my neighborhood, know there's people that does upset them to have things out that are not their household items. It states that in the ordinance. Household items cannot be left out in the elements. And 24 hours is given, and often they have a lot more than that. But we have things like this happen, and people kick in TV screens, and that's happened in our neighborhood because it's sitting out. And we can't just make it different in one place when you live in the inner part of the city with less amount of property, and you're right next to each other, and people put things out, and the students and the rentals, we'd have everything out. It's like that a lot. And so we've had TVs trashed, we've had things thrown around, we've had damage done. And I, for one, think that we have ordinances for a reason so that it is something that we can all follow, and that is it has to be an item that is meant for the outside to be out in the elements. And it is not an item that is for the outside.
Alder Dugan.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you, Mr. Wojciechowski, sorry, if I can't pronounce it. I understand what you were going through, but I have to say that we need to follow the ordinance.
Well, I understand that.
You do, I know.
Yes, but I mean, I'm actually from the country, so
I know, and that's the thing. So many people, even in my district, they have come from the country where they're accustomed to putting things outside, and it's no problem for anyone. That's not true in the city.
I didn't not know nothing. I mean, I just got, basically, I'm actually caretaking of my grandmother's house, is what it is.
I understood. I wanted to say something else, though. For a long, long time, I've worked with the city either as someone who wrote a regular column for our Stevens Point Journal in the old days about neighborhoods and about neighborhood attraction, appeal, and what wasn't appealing. And I think for many years, people simply did put things out, and no one was enforcing any, even though we may have had an ordinance that said, shouldn't do this. We didn't have a lot of enforcement in those years. And now we have more inspectors. We have a neighborhood improvement coordinator, and he has an assistant, part-time assistant, and he can actually go out there and let people know that this, is accurate, and it does help neighborhoods. It does help neighborhoods to get things in some kind of order. And then it informs you too, so that's where I stand.
Alder Dalton again.
So I guess I'm a little confused on some of my colleagues' perspective because this individual is actually saying that he did move the item in and out as he was working on his garage and put it on a trailer to move around. So again, I still point to that a single picture doesn't demonstrate that the item was out for 24 hours. You would need a picture 24 hours later, or at least 12, to maybe make some type of proof that this item was here. And I think, I guess I would also just say, like, the purpose of this committee and this appeal process, as we're going to talk about in a later item, is to be the check and balance as to when we think the ordinances are being applied to the strength and the decision, I guess, the values of the community. And so I guess here is a case that I think an individual is trying to improve his property. He complied with all the other requests, and it seemingly to apply with the final one, and ended up cleaning up everything. So again, I would still be in favor of approving this appeal.
In terms of not having proof that it was out 24 hours, it was observed to be out on May 1st. There was 2 weeks to comply. When they came back, it was out. It may well have been moved in and out and in and out.
But that's not
But
relevant.
it was outside when it was re-inspected. If it's now in a shed, perhaps it could have been moved in the shed when the initial notice was made.
I had all
For-
my valuables in there at the time.
Let's see.
Just
Goes
for
this way.
clarification, the applicant just told us that it was outside for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was not moved.
That I was taking it in and out.
In and out of what?
The garage at the time.
Could be.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought you were working on the garage floor and couldn't put anything in there.
Right.
So you did put things in there?
I had to get things under cover. I mean, I couldn't walk in there, I'd do whatever. Like I said, I had to do this in periods of time. I work a 40-hour week, and plus I'm putting down epoxy floor, which takes sometimes more than a couple days to dry.
Okay, so you did have the TV outside for more than a couple of days?
I had it in and out, and that's about all I can say. And it's a TV.
Okay, is it a functioning TV?
No, it's not. And I got it put down in my shed now after I got all my valuables back up in the garage where they belong.
What was the longest period of time you would say, estimate it was outside?
I have no clue.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else before
I
we?
move to deny the appeal.
I would like
I
to just
second.
add a second thing here, and that maybe Director Ostrowski could give us a little more insight here. And that is that there's a letter that goes to the person.
Sure.
And I know it's not in our packet, and I did call about this and talk to someone on it, and they did send one out, and it does give you, when you got that letter, it shows you what the ordinance states about household items. And that's why I would vote against it, even though we don't have it here. There is a document that went to you through the mail, and they always state what the ordinance is and why. And for you to move it to the side of the house is not complying with that whole letter that went out to you.
You have the letter with you?
I do not. That's why I'm asking Director Ostrowski.
Because the letter stated that I couldn't have it in front of the garage, in front of the house.
And you thought it
So
was-
another thing, it was put on the side of the house.
And that's what I'm asking if Director Ostrowski has anything, because usually that's what we have in our packets.
So we've got a copy of it right here.
Yeah.
Your chair has a copy of it.
Okay.
And maybe just read this first part?
Yes, thank you. So it says on here about the conditions, and it gives that interior items such as TVs are not allowed outside.
Yep.
Please remove prior to the date given, must be corrected by May 15th. So, and they went through the auto parts and tires, and then they went through the license for use on public roadways, all of it with the statutes in there. So that's where I can't say it's okay that it was moved to another spot. And left out. It was told at this time, and their initial letter was May 1st. And that's what I'm going upon, is that we need to be consistent and fair to everyone. For example, I got a ticket this week because I thought, my husband thought Friday was still a holiday because they had overnight parking. So it was daytime and he parked in front of our house and he couldn't.
Getting a little
So we got a
far
ticket.
afield- getting a
So
little
I can
far
tell
afield
you, I
there.
get it
We're getting
back
a
at
little-
me.
We're getting a little
Just-
far afield there.
No, it's that all of us have to.
All of us have to.
All right, all
You
right,
have to
all
have
right. Director Ostrowski,
No, Mary.
would you like to talk about the letter, the notification that homeowners receive, or property owners receive?
Yeah, so the first one went out on May 1st, and as Alderperson Nabel had read, it did state that the TVs cannot be outside and they have to be removed. Then the second one went out after the inspection for May 15th. We gave them 2 weeks to remove the TV, and the TV was not removed within 2 weeks. They did correct 2 other items, but this item still remained, and that's why the service charge was sent for the second one. We had to go to the property twice in order to inspect it. If all the violations would have been corrected, they would not have received a service charge. It's not supposed to be punitive, it's supposed to be to recover the cost for the inspections given. And furthermore, I think the justification for review of these appeals is more on the basis of the ordinance itself and whether or not staff followed the correct procedure and rules on the ordinance. If there are questions and concerns about the verbiage in the ordinance or the intent of the ordinance or whether we should have ordinances, that should be corrected through an ordinance amendment, not through an appeal.
We have a motion and a second. We have a motion to deny.
I'd like to make a comment, yeah.
Okay, Alder Phillips.
I guess there's a misunderstanding here. Seems like we're all under the impression you can put it out there for 24 hours and everything is fine. No, you're not supposed to put it out there
Thank you.
at all, and no time is given. If you put it out there and the inspector goes by in the next 10 minutes, he's going to give you a citation. You don't have 24 hours to keep it out there. I don't believe the ordinance says that. Normally, the ordinance guy will give you 24-hour period to get rid of it, and that's what should be understood. It doesn't belong in your front yard, and especially it doesn't belong in a boulevard. That's my only comment.
So we have a motion to deny and a second. All those in favor of denial will vote aye. Those opposed, vote no.
Should do them separately.
Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion's carried, the appeal is denied. Number 2 on the agenda is the license list. I would suggest we take that and the 2-year operator's license renewals as one item. Chief, were there any issues with any of the candidates here?
No, there were not.
So I would entertain a motion to approve. Alder Nabel?
I would move to approve the temporary, or the license list for A, new operators, bartenders licenses, and B, the 2-year operators license renewals.
And a second by Alder Phillips. Those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. Motion's carried. Okay, number 3, we can take these as a group, but I'll go through each one separately. For temporary Class B and Class B licenses for picnics, we've got Pacelli Catholic Schools, 1301 Maria Drive for Panacea on September 6th through the 8th. We have the Portage County Democratic Party. They're having a picnic on August 25th at the Piffner Building. Holy Spirit Parish will be having their Spirit Fest on July 28th on Fremont Street. And the Stevens Point Business Alliance is going to have their wine walk on August 23rd at 20 downtown businesses. They only need a wine license. So is anybody here from any of the events that would like to say something? Okay, would entertain a motion. Chief, do you have any issues with these?
No, as reoccurring events, we're good with them.
Good, got everything covered. I'd entertain a motion. Alder Nabel?
Motion, sorry.
Go ahead.
commercial, I move to approve the temporary Class B licenses for Pacelli, Portage, Holy Spirit, and Stevens Point Business Alliance.
Okay, Alder Dugan seconds. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. Motion carried. Item number 4, commercial animal establishment renewal for Country Paws Bed and Biscuit on Country Club Drive. Laura Bronk is the owner. Is anyone here from the Bed and Biscuit?
Move approval.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recycling license, junk dealer recycling license for Express Recycling on Water Street. Anyone here from that establishment? Okay, would entertain a motion. I'm
Just a
sorry?
note, that should be LLC, or your
Oh.
agenda just has LL. Forgot the C.
All righty. We'll make that change. Alder Dugan?
Yep, I would move to approve the junk dealer recycling license renewal for Express Recycling on Water Street.
We have a second? Okay, Alder Dalton. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We've got 2 requests for special event road closures. The Sherrill Companies, we could vote on these as one, but we'll separate them for discussion. The Sherrill Companies would like to close 4th Avenue on September 11th between Isidore and Reserve Streets for the Pink Week celebration. And forgive me if I mispronounce this, Dojinski?
Dojinki. Dziękuję.
I'm Irish, not Polish, I'm sorry. They will
Nobody's
be getting there. I got back to Stevens Point as fast as I could, right? They're having their big festival on September 14th in conjunction with Polish Heritage Awareness Society, the Downtown Business and Farmers Market, on that road closure request.
We may have a representative here for that one.
I'm sorry?
We may have a representative here from,
Okay,
There is no, sorry. There is no road closure for Dojinki.
okay.
And I also want to note the change again, because the last couple of years, they've had the event exclusively at the Moose. This year, they are going to have one downtown as well.
Okay, oh,
Bringing it
very
back.
cool.
Bringing it back.
So is anyone here from either of those groups?
Yeah, if I could.
Come on up, name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Christine Karn, and 913A Main Street. I did call, and forgive me, I don't know who I talked to, because after we put in for the event, we did just have 2 things come up. I believe on the original, there was no live animals, but we have secured some Polish Tetra mountain dogs, but they will be in front of the companion shop. I don't know if that was
The
added.
application says tentative 2 at pet store.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. And then the society, the Polish Heritage Awareness Society, will be using the farm shed booth at the farmer's market that day as well. But I've been in contact with the fire department and public health, and everything seemed to be okay. So, but no road closures, so, yep.
Just the event.
Anything, okay. Looking for a motion?
I make a motion to approve the special event request for the Sherrill Companies and the Dojinski downtown.
By the
I'll
end of the
second
night,
that.
we will all have this right.
You're going to take a test.
And a second by Alder Nabel. Those in favor would vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Those requests pass. Number 7 is an ordinance amendment to Chapter 3, Officials, Boards, and Employees. An amendment creating 3.56, an Administrative Appeals Board. Director Ostrowski, would you like to, or Logan, City Attorney Beveridge? Do we want to?
So I had mentioned this last month, basically not looking to actually create this right away, but this was a version of the ordinance I adapted from Madison's ordinance for the same purpose. So essentially you have a chapter of the statutes that we don't normally really have to look at, which is Chapter 68. And that sets up a administrative appeals process that sort of exists in case places don't have their own process established. The annoying thing that we went through somewhat recently was that we had someone come before this very body, go through their appeals process after having had multiple conversations and letters back and forth and arguments with staff, and then said, hey, I want to invoke my rights under Chapter 68 of the statutes. And we had to go through a whole bunch more process, ultimately culminating in the scheduling of a hearing, which the person did not attend. So basically, there's a provision in Chapter 68 that says that a municipality can opt out of being governed by that chapter. But in order to do so, you need to have something in place that replaces it. Now, we have sort of a scattershot approach to appeals processes currently in the ordinances. Some things have appeals provisions, some things don't. The intent behind this would be to create sort of a one-stop shop for appeals. That would cover everything other than things for which the statutes establish an appeals process, like tax assessments or zoning designations. There's their own process for that. Things related to alcohol, Chapter 125 of the statutes, that would still be handled separately. And a couple other little small things. We'd have to go through and look at where we have those established. You know, probably we wouldn't put parking ticket appeals in there. We'd leave that with the PD, and then you can appeal it to the circuit or to the municipal court if you'd like. So this is just sort of a first shot at, here, take a look. Obviously, I've got a note on there that says we need to decide who we even want to be the appeals body. Obviously, in the past, we have had a lot of those come before the Public Protection Committee. It does not have to be that way, especially if it's something where you end up having more of an on-demand basis for that body to meet. It doesn't even have to be a body comprised of alderpersons. It could be comprised of staff members. It could be comprised of other members of the public that are appointed to it, much in the same way that we have for our Board of Review and Board of Zoning Appeals. So interested to hear any comments you have. Like I said, this was adapted from the Madison one. I looked at a couple of other cities' ordinances, and they all read more or less similarly. So that would be the purpose of this. And it would change up the process leading up to that just slightly. You can see in there's some provisions that refer to reducing a decision to writing. Typically, when there is a staff member making a decision that somebody would want to appeal, usually you have that in a written format already. It's not off the cuff, hey, man, no, now get out of here. It's not usually that sort of thing. So typically, things have already been reduced to writing. It might change the way in which we handle some of those processes in order to include a little bit more detailed explanation of reasoning for it, something like that, in order to provide the appeals committee or whatever you decide to do for that with a little bit more to chew on. But that's sort of the gist of it. So like I said, just curious to hear your thoughts. And then I guess my expectation would be to probably try to finalize this and put it into place next month.
Comments from the committee first, then we can go to the audience. Alder Nabel.
First, I would like to thank Attorney Beveridge, because you gave more of an explanation to why this is being brought forward. In the beginning, it came to sound like we were thinking it was petty, people didn't come, so why should we give them any time of day, and I didn't like that at all. I think it's good to have people involved in the process, and I think everybody should have a right to be able to at least appeal. And so that really makes a difference to know that you had a case where you had to go back extensively to gain all this information for somebody, and then they didn't show up. It makes much more sense of why this even came forward, so I appreciate that extra information. And I'd also like to state that I still feel one of the problems is that we've all noticed is that people would maybe like to come, but they don't have the opportunity at the times we're meeting. And that was one of the reasons we looked at maybe having a committee where they could do it that way. I still would like it to be, as much as possible, that people are following what the ordinance states rather than our feelings, because I would have said no to many things if it was just about, well, gosh, I feel badly for this person. When we've had to look at and say, if you are going to say this is okay here, then you might as well change the whole ordinance. And I don't want us to be doing that ping pong kind of feeling of going back and forth of changing ordinances each time we have new alders or new committee members. I think it needs to be consistent. So we need to make sure that it's being followed by what a rule is stating in the ordinance and not just about emotions. Thank you.
And very good points, Alder Nabel. One of the things that occurs to me is that it might be best to have non-electeds serve in the role of this committee. Not only are you taking the personal and/or political aspects out of it, but there have been occasions where electeds maybe get a notification. I know that a former alderperson had one. This isn't uncommon, and it would kind of remove that aspect of it if we had non-electeds appointed to that, subject to council approval, of course, of those committees.
Well, certainly, any other member of the public who would be appointed to something wouldn't be immune from receiving
Right there,
well.
yeah, I thought of that.
I think another aspect of it too is that, when we have meetings in the evenings like this or whenever it is to discuss sort of general business that has universal applicability to the city, it makes sense to have a bigger gathering, a bunch of members of the public here. And when people come to our meetings, we've seen this many times where somebody shows up because there's the one thing on there that pertains to their business or their property or whatever it is, and that's the thing they're interested in, or just sort of some general topic that they have an interest in. And then they sit here for 3 hours waiting for us to get to it. Certainly these appeal meetings before this body would be open to the public, but people who are here for more general government type topics wouldn't have to sit through a series of property maintenance appeals. It'd speed up the meetings a bit. Certainly the person who is the subject of an appeal can still come to their own appeal, and anyone who's interested in it from their neighborhood, but it might be a little bit better forum for it rather than having it be part of our Monday committee meetings.
I just had a comment too. Perhaps that, I like where we're going here. I think this is a good idea. And I like not having elected serve on that committee. I think it's a way of getting citizens more involved in city processes. It might give that board or committee or whatever we call it, the ability to have different times in different locations. If you always work an evening shift, you can't come to a night meeting. But if they met on a quarterly basis, and the first quarter they met in this part at this time, and if you couldn't make that meeting, you could contact the office, have the fee held in abeyance until you could make an appeal. Citizens would have more flexibility. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but it might be something to consider.
I guess just from my experience of working with the court system, I think probably the best way to do it would be to just schedule things for when it works for everybody. Not necessarily a set time, set date, but okay, we've got one appeal, and then maybe you wait, tell people, okay, it's gonna be 2 weeks or something like that, and see if you gather up a few more. But hold them when it's convenient for the members, for the appellant, for the staff members involved. Usually the staff members' schedules are the most flexible of all, but keep in mind too, that this will go way outside the scope of just property maintenance appeals. This will be something
Yeah.
that'll apply to, denial of all kinds of other licensing, other than the alcohol stuff that I mentioned. It could relate to things that have to do with building permits or, any number of things. I mean, there's a lot of ordinances and a lot of decisions that are being made that somebody could, in theory, appeal, so.
Thank you. I do have a question. I do have a concern, and I just want to make sure this is noted. If you have non-elected, if it was me and I had, was an elected official and I had a violation and I was appealing it, I would have to recuse myself like we do with other things, so I'm not concerned about that. But I am concerned about having just anybody be put on a committee that one of the things that we've been pounded in our heads about on these ordinances, if we say it's okay, we'll give a variant, give leeway to one, then you have to be open to all the others. And that has been stated by you many times, and so I have held to that as being how I vote. Because it is what the ordinance says, it is the rule. What happens when you do, and I've seen it already with some of our other appeals for licensing for rentals and other things in zoning, that people that are on the committee they don't think it's right to have to charge someone, that everybody should be able to have two-family home if they want to. We open that up to now, why do we even have the ordinance then? Or those licenses, in the sense of that you need to have, they're going to follow through with what the letter of the law or the ordinance says. Because you've seen that already happen.
Well, certainly the appointment process, if that's the route you decide to go with, the common council and the mayor would be able to choose which people they would like to appoint and could ask them questions about what their approach would be. And if somebody wants to conceal the fact that they would be extremely lenient and then thrust it upon their decision-making, well, certainly you'd be informed of that, and you could decide whether or not you want to reappoint that person later. But we certainly already entrust quite a bit of the sort of legislative function at the commission level to non-electeds, whether it's the Water and Sewerage Commissioners, the Police and Fire Commission, which exercise a great deal of independent authority that's not even subject to review by the council or the mayor. Or, like I mentioned earlier, the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Board of Appeals. Certainly you have a pretty rigid statutory framework for those bodies. But I can understand your concern, kind of giving the reins to someone else if that's the direction you decide to go with for this. But I think that's probably one of those things where it's kind of saying, well, if there was a problem, then there'd be a problem. Well, sure. But ultimately, the enforcement priorities and the level of sort of strictness of the enforcement and the policies themselves and the ordinances are still going to be well within the control of the Common Council, and the direction of the staff members will still be under the control of ultimately the mayor. So
I just concerned, like if the police someone comes in, they want to appeal something, they're writing a ticket for something, and then any other person that's got a negative feeling about the police or about parking or anything else would be on a board, and they're going to make the decisions. I just want to make sure it's going to be people that have written, that know the law, and know that what their duties are, and not just that it's for the city, not just for an individual here and there, but that you have to have consistency.
Just to be clear, if somebody's issued a citation, this would not be the place for that. It would be to the municipal court. So.
Using that as an example of the police department would not hand that over to somebody else. It would be with the people that work with that. And I would rather have it be department people that are on that committee because they have the knowledge.
Alder Dalton.
A couple of comments on this proposal. First being that I would not be looking to approve the adoption of this without a composition that includes some of the elected officials and probably council members, in part because I think creating just another at arm's length from us as legislatures just further, I don't know, creates a greater canyon between actually how these are applied and the changing of times and the changing of character and of constituent and residents' situations. And I think that it's important to have at least one representative on that in order to maintain a touch of how that is. And yeah, I guess I also just like to think, I think you can appreciate this, Attorney Beveridge, being in law, that there's definitely, I think any legal expert would say that the laws are open to interpretation, which is why we have the court system, because they are constantly being read, reviewed, and applied to situations of the time. So there's no absolute in the law. Maybe the chief would want, we could get into a pretty long discussion about that, I think. But I think that there's definitely, no language in our ordinances is probably perfect because it was written by a body of individuals with the help of an attorney, and I don't think any of us would say we're perfect, especially not in terms of legal writing. So I think that that's just an important fact to consider. And I appreciate that there would be some flexibility in the time and scheduling of this process, and so I think that is an improvement for what could happen here. But I think also as we look to fill the positions, considering that the composition of this body would need to be representative, and that people who have flexibility in their work schedules, maybe come from a certain kind of economic class or age class, and so really doing our best to try to get a representative body to be a part of this, and not just those that might have the greatest flexibility in their schedule.
Anybody from the audience like to comment?
What about me?
Alderman Phillips?
Yes, we're the audience.
Okay, I guess I mentioned this last month. I'm totally against another layer of government here. Without no mention of a fee. Now, we're already talking about staff time. Everybody mentions staff time, all this work that's got to be done. For somebody that walks in the door with a frivolous appeal, you have to pay for that. I am a taxpayer. I don't do anything wrong. Why should I pay or have our staff, city staff, do all this work just because
Somebody wants to argue.
it's a nice thing to do? No. You mentioned meeting in different places or whatever to accommodate the perpetrators. Okay, we're going to meet in the perpetrator's garage this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I can see all this taking place. You got to stay away from it. What you need to baby step right now is to just charge a fee for their appeals and leave it the way it is. A lot of frivolous appeals will go away. Try that first. If that don't work, then go to this another layer because we need it. That's all I have to say.
So I can comment on that. Alder Phillips, trust me when I say I know from personal experience that due process certainly can be tedious. However, it is guaranteed, and that is the reason that Chapter 68 exists, is to ensure that independent of what communities write into their ordinances, there's a backstop of state statute that sets up a framework for due process. What this would do is not, in my mind, create another layer of government. It would put us more smartly in control of the way that we guarantee those rights, so that we're not going through some process that we set up in our ordinances and then having to also go through a process that's set up under statute. So I think if anything, this actually streamlines it potentially. And like I said, we've seen one real life example already of how that essentially made us have to go through even more steps than we would have. With regards to a fee, I know that was obviously a topic, I believe it was last month. I think certainly it fits within the context of this discussion, but let me give you an example. If you get a speeding ticket in municipal court, 1 to 10, lowest category, it's $98.80. Now, there's nothing in the ordinance that says the fine for that is $98.80. It says it's $30, I believe. Once you add in the court costs and all the other surcharges and everything that are established under state statute, that's how you end up at that $98.80. everyone pays that. Whether you show up to court and fight it, go all the way to trial or not, even if you just default, that's still the cost. So everybody who gets a ticket is helping pay for the cost of the court. I think with regards to any discussion about fees, the better way to look at it, and probably the only legally defensible way to look at it, would be to say we're not going to require you to pay an additional fee to go through an appeal. We're going to look at the staff time numbers that we used to calculate the level of the service fees to cover our actual costs. And if we had omitted a calculation or omitted from that total the amount of staff time that's spent on the appeals themselves, then perhaps that could mean a revisiting of that fee level. Currently, it's $100. If enough staff time is going into preparing documents for the appeals that's not actually covering our costs, then you could look at doing an increase to that. But I think to charge somebody a fee specifically to exercise their right to an appeal would be the wrong approach.
I agree with that 100%. I want to have the costs of staff time, your time, everybody's time, taken care of. I don't want the taxpayer to be burdened with frivolous appeals. And if you can do it that way, I'm in favor.
Anybody else in the audience? I think we've had a pretty robust discussion tonight. Thank you very much, Attorney Beveridge, for your efforts in this regard. I think we've given you, I hope, a good direction, and we'll see where we go from here.
I think what I'll do to bring forward a draft for the next time we talk about this is to create some language that establishes sort of a hybrid body, perhaps something with one or two members of the council, sort of a liaison type thing, similar to some of the other bodies we have right now. So,
Yeah, we have a lot of those.
I would agree with that,
Perhaps
too.
if we put an alder or two on the committee, perhaps they would not serve as the chair, but just be committee members.
Exactly.
Designate something like that,
Sure.
an elected official would not
Yep.
serve as chair, but they would still be on the body.
I don't want to
Be
be
a
on there, by the
tweak.
way.
Anyway,
I'll write that in, but not Alder Phil.
anyway, if it works, who
20 years
knows?
from now, people
It's a
bet.
discussion, right? Looks like we've concluded all our business. We will adjourn at 7:11.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/video.